Hi, I'm Daniel from HPOO, and in this video I want to demonstrate how multiple users can interact in ODesigner using the integrated SCM. In our scenario, we'll have two users, Chris and Jane, who works in the same company and get a task to work on authoring the same project. Each one will have his own workspace in ODesigner, and their work will be shared by the Git version control system, which is integrated in ODesigner. To use Git in Designer, they need first to create a repository in their Git server. As a Git server, they can use any provider like GitHub, GitLab, Atlassian, etc. For this example, we'll use GitHub server. After the repository is created, it can be imported in OO Designer by each user and their work will be versioned. Both users can push their changes to the main repository and pull the changes that the other did on the repo. Okay, let's start. Firstly, I will create a repository with Chris' account on the public GitHub, and I will give access to Jane to this repo. Chris will go in his designer workspace and will import the repository by clicking on the Git button. He will use HTTPS protocol in order to connect to the server, and he will provide the repository URL accordingly. Before importing, he needs to verify the connection to the provided URL. As you can see, he encountered a problem related to proxy. As Chris is trying to connect to a public server from behind a proxy, he needs to configure the proxy settings in ODesigner. I will show you right now how you can do that. We go in the ODesigner installation folder, and under conf folder, we open the designer-wrapper.conf file. There we look for proxy fields and we enable the proxy by changing the proxy mode to enabled and by providing the proxy host and port in our case. Of course, if you have a user and a password on the proxy, you should provide those too. After the file is saved, the user has to restart ODesigner service. Going back in the designer, Chris will verify the host again, and this time verification will be successfully. When all the needed fields are completed, he will be able to import the repository. In the projects panel, we now can see the name of the repository on which we are connected. Chris will create a new project in his workspace and start his work on a new flow. In this flow, let's say that he wants to install an application like Node.js on a Linux machine using ssh command. After he is ready, he will expand the SCM panel and he will be able to see his changes. As you can observe, there is a green item inside. In the SCM, green color stands for the new added items, blue for modified items, and gray for deleted items. Now he wants to commit this change that he did on the repository, so he will use the commit and push button for that. After he enters a relevant message for this commit, he will be able to commit and push his changes. The SCM actions are logged and can be visible in the console under the SCM panel. In the meantime, Jane also imports the same repository but in her workspace. One thing that she does different than Chris is that she uses SSH protocol in order to connect to the repository. For that, she will need to generate a SSH key pair, so she presses the generate button from the import repository panel. Now a private key is automatically imported in Designer and a public key is generated. The public key has to be imported in the Git server so the import can be done. After import, Jane will be able to see the project that Chris pushed to the main repository. She will start her work in the same project by creating a new flow. She will use Chris flow in her flow in order to install multiple applications like Docker and Node.js. After adding her changes inside, she has a version for review, so she commits and push her flow for Chris to be able to review it. Now, on Chris' environment, he needs to pull the changes from the server repository in order to be able to see Jane's flow. He can do that by going in SCM panel and clicking on the pull button. He checks Jane flow and he realized that she forgot to add the send email operation in her flow, so he does that for her. He commits and pushes his changes. Meanwhile, Jane modifies her flow by renaming the step that she just added. When she wants to commit and push her changes, she will be prompted that she is not up to date with the server because Chris just committed and pushed some changes. So she first needs to update her workspace by pulling the changes from the server. When she does that, she will be prompted with the conflict panel because she modified the same flow that Chris modified. So she has to choose which version she wants to use. She will choose use theirs in order to see the changes that Chris did and also will keep a copy of her flow. She opens the flow that came from the server with Chris changes and she sees what is different inside. So she can add her change to the same flow. Now she can delete her copy because she doesn't need it anymore. For the new flow that was created with both changes from Chris and from her, a modified item is visible in the SCM panel. Jane can either commit or revert this change. For this example, we will revert this change in order to see what happens. As we can see, the step is renamed back to the initial value. Now Jane will rename it again and she's ready to commit the flow. So this is a simple scenario how multiple users can interact on their projects using Git in ODesigner. Thank you for watching. For more videos and guides you can follow our community.